Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where in the world you are today. Welcome to the PMG webinar, Is Your Service Catalog Built for Change? I'm Russell Miller, and I'm a sales executive. Wait a second. I'm going to change my hat real quick. I'm a solutions provider here at PMG. Today I'm going to be speaking with you about change within the enterprise and about how IT responds to it. Specifically, we're going to review how a service catalog should react in this new reality of constant change. A few housekeeping items. You can ask questions via the chat window. We'll answer questions at the end of the event. The webinar is scheduled to run for 30 minutes, though we may run a bit short of that and give you some of your day back. And a copy of the deck and recording of the webinar will be provided by PMG after the event. So here it comes, ready or not. Change within your enterprise, no matter the size, is inevitable, and no department knows or bears the brunt of this more than IT. Strategic initiatives, when the brain trust gets together and makes decisions without your input. Major application vendor changes, such as your CRM, your HRM, or heaven forbid your ERP. Minor application additions like web conference or chat tools. Taking some of your applications to the mysterious cloud we keep hearing about. Or outsourcing applications entirely, such as Salesforce or ChangePoint or Workday. And lastly, change for IT comes in the form of employee behavior. Believe it or not so long ago, the phone you see on the right was a major disruption for fledgling IT departments. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like when we all get transporters. Well, speaking of Star Trek, when it comes to change, resistance is futile. So embrace it, because the pace is not going to slow anytime soon. Well, most of you will recognize this diagram or some version of it. The IDLE framework gave us the mandate that we embrace change management and continual process improvement. And of course that not only sounds good, but actually makes a lot of sense. But what if your applications don't have the flexibility to change as quickly as the business environment? What if the rate of change is faster than the resources who are tasked with implementing those changes can manage? I would argue that what we really have is a culture of continuous change, which makes continual service improvement that much harder to achieve. So what's change look like at the speed of old IT? Well, some may say IT is slow to change. We prefer to say IT is methodical about change. And that's because changes to legacy applications may be tremendously complex or not possible at all. Yet the enterprise may be wholly dependent on those applications. Think AS400 for you in manufacturing, or maybe Lotus Notes, which many Fortune 500 companies still utilize today. If changes can be made there, it's often certainly going to take a lot of development time and be very complex. But for your customer, the enterprise or the business, whichever term you prefer, there's always a fire, an emergency, gotta have it now. They say, hey IT, you said when you finish that new app, then all our problems would be solved. When will then be now? And when IT can't react to that urgency fast enough, well, we know what happens. You get a bad case of shadow IT. So here we have this shifty employee, probably somebody in marketing, I imagine, sitting in the dark at his laptop preparing to spin up a server at Amazon or Azure for Acme Anvil Corporation. So all kidding aside, for many of you, this is a reality, and it's more than just an annoyance. It can pose real security risks for your enterprise. So how do you avoid shadow IT? Well, you learn to change at the speed of new IT. We learned there is an expectation that IT delivers solutions to solve business problems quickly. So let's quickly review some of the traits of the new IT. IT is agile and we can define that both as a system in which requirements and solutions evolve through collaboration between self-organizing cross-functional teams. That's our literal definition of agile software development. But we can also take a look at this in the literal sense, is that the new IT is able to move quickly and easily. IT is collaborative, and it embraces the voice of the customer, the internal customer, as much as the sales or marketing team embrace the voice of the external customer. The new IT is communicative about changes coming down the pipeline, so users aren't caught off guard or by surprise when a new app appears on their desktop. Basically what it comes down to is the new IT has to emerge from the silo and be part of the overall enterprise team. Now, I know this isn't really revelatory for most of you. IT departments across the globe are quickly moving to embrace these values. And one place we see this most is in the acceleration of the adoption of the service catalog. So why? Why the service catalog? Well, I think it's worth noting that the service catalog was born within the ITIL framework. This concept of IT compiling all the services they provide, documenting the relationships, and then providing those services to the enterprise. A way to request those services in a modern way rather than the old send an email to IS Help Desk and hope something happens. Or worse, having to call the help desk and get somebody on the phone for a request that could have been a self-service request all along. These are the things that a service catalog helps to alleviate. So why is there such growth in the adoption of the service catalog? Well, because IT needs that e-commerce style portal to manage and deliver services across the enterprise. And because we know that the consumerization of IT leads to greater user satisfaction at the enterprise. So for many of you, you are either A, considering a service catalog, or B, you already have one and you want to know, is it built to change? That's why you're here. Well, here's some questions you want to ask yourself to know if your service catalog is built for change. Does or will making changes involve coding or long development times? Are you able to make changes on the fly, or do you have to measure changes in terms of hours, days, weeks, or months even? If the enterprise applications change, can your service catalog change with them? Will it be seamless to the end user, or will there be major disruptions? And lastly, did you build or are you considering building a service catalog within your ITSM suite? A little bit more about that last point. Let's talk about prepackaged applications real quick. This can be any application, not just a service catalog. Often prepackaged applications are auxiliary components of the enterprise application suite. They are often not part of the core functionality of those actual suites. So some that I would throw in there would be Microsoft Paint. When was the last time you used Paint as part of the Microsoft Office package? It's a great tool, but it's not part of the core functionality for most people. Still, prepackaged applications like these make promises of being designed for customization to meet customers' needs. They offer rapid deployment and greater user satisfaction. That's the promise. The reality is not always as pretty. Generally, customization means coding, and whenever there is coding, it's never rapid. Your needs may change, and your customizations often won't change with them. And lastly, customizations, once deployed, limit flexibility to make future changes. So how do you ensure that your service catalog is built for change? How do you ensure that you look like these folks, superheroes, to the rest of the enterprise? Well, first off, we want to do what we can to make sure our service catalog is configured, not customized. As we discussed in the previous slide, customizations often won't change with the needs of the business. And customizations do tend to break during upgrades. You want a service catalog to be agile, like the new IT. You want it to be flexible and allow for quick, decisive changes. You want it to be dynamic, not static. It should have the capability to dynamically retrieve data from external sources and render them back into the catalog. And of course, you want it to be integrated so your other enterprise applications, so that it can become that single pane of glass, that one-stop shop that your users are looking for. So a great place to start is with a low-code or a no-code strategy. A service catalog that is built to change can be configured instead of customized, and this allows for rapid changes to be made. Changes to the user interface, to the request forms, or even changes to workflow automation can be made in minutes or hours, as opposed to weeks or months. Configuration changes also allow for seamless transition for end users and fewer disruptions to the enterprise. A service catalog built for change has a flexible user interface. It allows you to brand the service catalog to make it the single pane of glass for the internal e-commerce portal for your enterprise. The one place that all the users go for all the requests, whether it be from IT or from other departments. A flexible user interface allows for role-driven views. So, for example, a user in engineering may see a host of different services than the user from marketing. Or possibly a subsidiary may have a completely different user interface altogether. Based on their authentication, it might be branded for their subsidiary division. All of this, mind you, can be handled within one instance of the software for a service catalog built for change. So here we talk about editing forms on the fly. We want to be able to make changes quickly with really no disruption to the business. In this example, the enterprise has made a policy change, and there will be no more temporary workers hired. So the service catalog administrator simply goes into the onboard employee request form, removes the option of temporary from the radio set, saves the form, and deploys it, and now that change is live. So again, configuration, there was no coding done to make this change. A service catalog built for change allows you to reconfigure workflow automation. By employing a drag and drop workflow engine, an administrator has the ability to make high-speed changes and at a low cost to the enterprise because that resource's time is not as long. It allows the administrator to adhere to new governance or policy within the enterprise. In our example on the bottom, we see that a change in policy has been made. Now it requires a director approval for creating an AD user. So instead of the notification step, an approval step was put in the workflow, thus allowing a seamless transition for the new policy. In the example to the right, a major application vendor change was made at the enterprise level. The ITSM suite was switched from one vendor to another. For the standalone service catalog that is built for change, the actions of create a ticket and an incident for one ITSM tool is simply switched to create ticket and incident for the new ITSM tool. Again, allowing a seamless and for the end user invisible transition for providing service. Quick question, when changes are made to external databases, does your service catalog need to be reconfigured to render those changes? Well, a service catalog built for change really does not, because it dynamically retrieves and renders data right into the user-facing form. In this example, we see that dynamic costing is easily handled within the request for virtual machine form. The form calls a data provider for the current costs of various machine configurations and renders those costs back to the user. Now that user really can make an informed decision about the cost of spinning up that machine because they will know how much is going to hit their department. So a service catalog built for change helps drive true IT financial management because it is the transaction engine and costs are in real time. Change and the impact of reporting. A service catalog built for change allows for accurate and real-time reporting. On a previous slide, we discussed how cost changes for a virtual machine were dynamically retrieved and rendered in a request form. Now when a user runs a report on virtual machines provisioned, that trued-up cost is accounted for. Another example might be if costs of hardware or software are changed in an internal database. In the dynamic service catalog, that updated information flows through the service within the catalog, and ultimately the cost of those service requests can be reported on. So what's a blueprint for building a service catalog built for change? Well, if you're building or plan to implement a service catalog at your enterprise, or even if you already have a service catalog deployed, let's review these last few points. We want to strive for a low code or no code whenever possible. We want to avoid customizations that aren't flexible enough to change with the business. And whenever possible, we want to configure, not customize. Make it dynamic, where real-time information and costing is part of every service. And lastly, ensure that it's integrated to other enterprise applications, allowing for that single pane of glass your users are looking for. So as I said at the beginning, we are definitely running ahead of schedule. So I want to open it up to questions. I know that some flew through in the chat window, so let's take a look at those real quick. Okay, so our first question is, do changes to forms need to be made by IT? So that's a great question, and the answer is it depends. Generally, the service catalog is maintained by the IT department. There will be a service catalog administrator who is the go-to person for the service catalog. This will be the person tasked with making changes, etc., depending on how many resources you put to this. And generally, it's about 1 to 2 resources that actually manage the catalog. So the service process owner is really the person who can make the changes, and it doesn't necessarily have to be IT, but almost invariably it winds up being an IT managed process. So how quickly can I get a service catalog up and running? Okay, so again, it's a depends question. There's no real clear answer for that, because it depends on how complex or robust you want your service catalog to be. And my suggestion and best practice is that you start with the low-hanging fruit. You want to pick services that are going to have a high impact on the enterprise right out of the gate. So the first services you might be able to build out in terms of days, maybe a couple weeks, and then building out 10, 12 services might take a couple months. Depending on how complicated you want them to be, or how complex is probably a better term for it. We've actually had people create a service catalog and have upwards of 100 services running within the first 6 months. But again, best practice is to have those really critical, high-impact services right out of the gate to make a big splash at the enterprise and get everybody bought in. Let's see, what other applications does PMG integrate with? Can you integrate with SharePoint? So that one's kind of specific, and it's it's about PMG specifically, and we actually have over 40 purpose-built connectors to major enterprise applications. So some examples are BMC Remedy or ServiceNow or SAP. SharePoint is one that we have a robust list of actions that are available to interact with SharePoint. We actually it follows up. I see another question is, can we? How did they put this? Can we integrate our SharePoint portal with the PMG tool? So the answer to that is yes. We have actually had a client that they had already built out a very nice looking portal, and so we have essentially became the transaction engine, and they have their SharePoint portal as their front end. How does the branding work? What I think they mean is like the user interface. How do we brand the portal to the client? And that's not done through code. It is a theme administrator that is part of our core functionality of the product. It allows for a lot of configuration on that portal page for very different looks and feel, depending on what the client wants. And they can make those changes themselves, and that's one of the beauties of it. So the branding can be different depending on who's logging in. So a company that has, let's say it's multiple companies under one industrial conglomerate of some sort, you could have one instance of the catalog, and the people from company A see their portal, and people from company B see their portal and the relevant services therein, and yet it's still one instance of the catalog. So another question about connectors. As I described, we have dozens of purpose-built connectors already, and the connectors themselves have many actions depending on what the application that they're integrating with. Well, on that note, I think I'm actually going to cut this short and give you some of your day back. It looks like the other 3 questions are related to the questions that I just answered. So I want to thank you for attending this webinar. PMG really appreciates it. We really enjoyed talking to you about Service Catalog Built for Change. If you have further questions or want to just dive deeper, please reach out to me directly at rmiller@pmg.net. or if you want to just do a lot of research on your own, you can go to www.pmg.net. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.